Hello and welcome back to the free online woodworking school. In this video, we're going to finalise the carcass joinery on this shaker table by cutting a lapped dovetail in the top of both of the legs. So this is where we left things off last time. We had just finished cutting the mortise and tenon for the bottom rail, and we got the underside of that perfectly aligned with the underside of these side rails. Everything has been cut and fit in the previous parts of this series, and now all we've got to do is fit this last rail in the top of the legs, which conveniently for us has already been marked out because we did all of the marking out at the same time at the start of this project to make sure that the shoulder lines on this top rail were exactly the same length as the bottom rail and the back rail as well. So here's the dovetail we're going to be cutting. Nice and simple. So I feel like I need to reiterate this every single time I cut a dovetail. When cutting these joints, the most important part is that you get the end grain square. Don't worry if this angle is slightly off, whether it's too acute or obtuse. It doesn't matter because we're going to be tracing around that when it comes to fitting it. The end grain, however, this square cut along the top is absolutely essential because if it tapers in on both sides, then it's going to act as a wedge in the top of the leg and it's possibly going to split the leg. Alternatively, if it's a backwards wedge like this, then it might fit in the bottom, but you'll end up with a huge gap on the front face here. So here's how I do it. I put the saw on the end grain on the waist side of the line, angle the saw to match the dovetail as best as I can see, and then just lift it up slightly so I'm only hitting this back corner. Do a few little strokes to get the saw kind of locked in place. And then what we're going to do is just lower the saw down like this, tracking the line from back to front to get that end grain line established and square. And now, because we've got that line, our saw locks into it and all I've got to do is focus on getting the angle right. But again, don't worry too much about this. If it's slightly off, we'll make it fit later. Long strokes with the saw, down to the baseline. That's one side done. So again here, get it on the waist side, angle it to match the dovetail, and then just lift it up slightly. Take away the back corner, lower the saw, get it locked in the end grain, and then do long strokes, tracking the line on the front. Next, we want to chop off these side bits. And for this, I'm going to leave a little bit of material so that I can chisel back to the line afterwards. There you go, you can see a bit of a shoulder line there so we can clean that up with a chisel. Okay, and then to chisel back to these lines, we're going to take away as much of the material as we can before putting a chisel into the gauge line, which is probably about there. And now I'm looking along the back side of the chisel here to ensure that we are chopping down at 90 degrees. If you ever need help for this, you can get a small engineer square and check it on the back as well. But I tend to find just doing it by eye is okay. Finish that off. Okay, so there we go. Our dovetails are done. You might be able to see on that right-hand side one, I didn't quite track the line down the front. Again, this doesn't matter as long as the end grain is square. Okay, so next we will get these marked out on top of the leg. And you may remember earlier on in the series, we've already marked the back wall of this joint because we marked everything out simultaneously. So all we've got to do is mark the kind of angle of the dovetail on the end grain, as well as mark out the depth in terms of height. And much like the bottom rail, the dovetail in the top rail has been offset slightly so that the back edge of it can be flush with the back side of the leg and create a 5mm step on the front edge. You might notice on the front here that it's going to get quite close to the haunch on that mortise and tenon. Don't worry too much if you accidentally break through into it. Ideally we won't, but this is never going to be seen as the top of the table will hide it. As long as the strength is there, that's all that really matters. So let's get this disassembled and marked out. So looking at the letters on the front, we can start with G. That's going to be the dovetail we're working with here. I'm just going to get one of the other legs from behind to kind of support this as I transfer the layout. So dovetail G, that's going to go on here. We're going to get it flush with the back face of this leg, so I can just use an engineer square for that. And then all I've got to do is focus on this front to back location. So we'll get it so the shoulder line closes up and it lines up with that back wall that we've laid out. And then simply get a marking knife and carefully trace around it. And of course, always mark out your waist. We can then spin it around and we can start laying out how deep we want this to go. In order to do that, we just set a marking gauge to the thickness of the top rail. Make sure to get this absolutely bang on. We don't want it to sink in too far and we absolutely don't want it sticking proud. So the thickness is set. We can then put that on the top of the leg, do a light scratch mark across. Don't go all the way to the front edge, because remember this dovetail stops about 5mm shy, and you'll see a marking gauge line otherwise. And then these lines on the top can just be squared down to that baseline. So that's one of the dovetails marked out. We'll do the same on the second leg now. So get a supporting block from behind, check which letter you're meant to be marking out, get it flush on the inside face, mark around it. We can use the same setting on the marking gauge to mark the depth, and then square it down from above. Now on lap dovetails like this, there are all sorts of ways of getting rid of that waste. Some of them would include drilling it, some of them routing it, some of them just cutting and chiseling it out. I tend to use a sort of combo approach, minus the routing, I don't do that. And so what we're going to do here is cut the sidewalls with a saw first to kind of establish the boundaries of what we're going to be drilling and chiseling. That way we're going to reduce the possibility of something splitting outside the realms of the socket that we're going to be cutting. So we'll cut the sidewalls, drill out as much as we can to sort of remove the bulk of the waste, and then just chisel back to the lines with the chisel. Now I've seen some people get a bit confused when cutting down these walls, because clearly you want to be doing this with the saw, but then it's kind of like, well, what angle do you use? Remember, we're not looking to put any kind of tilt on this. We want it to cut perfectly plumb. And so all you've got to do is match the angle of the line on top, and then just simply drop the handle while maintaining that angle. I'm cutting about 1mm away from the line so we can chisel back to it later. And we're just watching both the front and the back line simultaneously to make sure we don't cut beyond the lines. If you cut beyond the line on the top here, it doesn't really matter because it's going to be hidden, but the front face will be visible, so you want to be careful there. I think I'll just do one more straight down the middle to further weaken that material. So now the question is, do you drill in from the front or do you drill in from the top? For me, I personally prefer drilling in from the front here, because what that does is it creates short grain above the drill bit and it's easier to chip out. Whereas if you drill from the top, the fibers kind of surrounding that drill bit are still attached below, and so it can just be a bit messier to clean up. So we'll just mark the depth on a small drill bit. See, this is what I mean with short grain. Like that top bit is almost already popping out. There you go, that's all really weak in there now. So we can just come in with the chisel. Don't go too mental at this stage, because we want to work back to the lines on the base as well as the back of the socket kind of at the same time. So don't go hacking away material if it doesn't feel like it wants to be removed. So here, for example, these fibers that I'm chiseling down from the back are still attached at the bottom. So while I could continue, a much better use of my time would be to lay the leg down and work from the face here to detach those fibers from the bottom and then restart on the top. And while we're here, we can begin working our way back to the baseline. Okay, so I suspect that's detached a lot of those fibers now. There you go, look, they're all falling out. So we'll get it up again and continue working our way back. And when you're doing this, just listen for that sound change so you know you've bottomed out. That's why using little taps is quite important for this. So I'm going to try and get it an equal distance away from all the lines on the top. So that's where we're currently at with things. Then we'll just detach those fibers again, and by this point we can probably put our chisel into the baseline and finish this side off. Okay, and then working from the face, we'll just sort of get all of this rubbish out so that we can clean back to these top lines without any debris in the way. And I like using a small chisel to do this, just to sort of chip out all the bits in the middle. It's just a bit better at getting into the corners, and you can be a bit more precise with the material that you're trying to remove. So there we go. That is mostly cleared. Now we'll start with these side walls. What I like to do here is just put the chisel into them and just give it a few taps from above to separate the material. And we'll just make sure to get right into the back corners. And then if we cut the grain at the bottom, I'm doing it with one of my marking knives here, that's going to sever all of the fibers above. And so then what we should be able to do is get a chisel in that knife line down the front. The advantage to this is that I know this line is square, and so the socket walls are going to be square as well, rather than just chisel from above and hope that the grain splits in the correct direction. So get it in the line at the front and just kind of wiggle it up and down, and these should come out really nicely. If it's quite difficult to remove, it's because you haven't cut the fibers at the bottom, and then just a little twist should pop them out quite nicely. Same on this wall, look, just do a few progressive cuts on those fibers at the bottom, chisel in the line at the front, match the angle of the socket on top, and then just give it a wiggle up and down, tracking that line on the top. It's getting a little bit sticky there, so I'm just going to separate that, maybe do a few more. Yeah, I can feel they're still attached at the bottom there. And we're looking to get right back into the corners, so we're touching that back line. And then finally, with the side walls done, we can work our way down to the back. And preferably you'll want to find a chisel here that is as wide as you can fit. By the looks of it, this one is going to be perfect. It might bruise the side slightly, but because this is hidden, I don't mind. If this was a lap dovetail on the side of a drawer, then I'd probably step down a size chisel. Again, I'm just sighting down the back wall to make sure that we're descending vertical, because this back wall being slightly angled back is one of the main reasons for lap dovetails not bottoming out. Get a small chisel to kind of separate those fibers on the back. And then, in theory, hey, bloody hell, that's actually one of the best I've done. I'm actually genuinely really happy with that. And let's just, yes, I did definitely cut it on the right face. That would have been good, wouldn't it? And so that's the key with cutting out these sockets. A lot of it is just paying attention to the grain. And when you're chiseling, just think about like where the fibers are still going to be attached and how you can go about severing them to make the chiseling easier. And for me, when it comes to severing those fibers, the best way to do it is with a drill, just to sort of get the bulk of it roughly kind of weakened, and then use a marking knife to get into the corners, cut those remaining fibers so you can chisel back to the walls nice and accurately. If you want to buy one of these marking knives, I sell them on my website. I make them all myself. It's got a fully replaceable blade, nice little thumb hold on there. And if you flip the blade upside down, it works for right-handers as well. So we'll do the other one, all from one vantage point. Firstly, we're going to cut the walls. Drill in from the front to weaken the fibers. I'm just going to chisel out the bulk of the waist, and as soon as I feel resistance from above, I'm going to come in from this side, which, to be honest, could probably happen right about now. I'll just do it upright so you can still see it. Now I'm going to work my way down to the lines and try and get it like an equal distance all the way around, where there's like one chop remaining to get back to the line. Okay, and then chisel down to the baseline. Clean up as much of the waste inside as possible. Separate the fibers at the top by chiseling into the walls first. Just down a couple of millimeters. Sever the fibers at the bottom to allow them to detach easier. Lock the chisel into the vertical line down the face. Follow the line on top and just sort of wiggle it up and down. And if it gets too stiff, just go back and recut the fibers at the bottom. Give it a twist at the back to separate the fibers. Same again here. Track the line on the top, sort of wiggle it back and forth, twist at the back. And then finally, put the chisel into the end grain on the back wall. Sight along the line to make sure you're chopping vertical. Attach the fibers, clean up all the scraggly bits. And then with any luck, God, I'm having a good day today. And there we go. In about 5 minutes, that's the second socket done. So yeah, that only took me 5 minutes, but don't aspire to get it done in 5 minutes. That's not necessarily down to the speed that I was cutting things, but more about the efficiency of the processes. So always thinking about where is the most effective and efficient place to remove the fibers from. Oh, That's so nice. Where's the most efficient place to remove the fibers from to make the job more efficient and easier as well? A lot of it does come down to just practice, but try to give yourself just a bit of time and space to think about what the most effective steps would be, rather than just go blasting in with a chisel and drill, hacking out the waste as quick as possible, because chances are you just won't get a good result. And so in terms of carcass joinery, that's us done. In the next video, we're going to start tapering the legs and prepping this for glue up. But if you've got this far, very well done. You should have a table that hopefully holds itself together just with the friction of the joints themselves. If they're a little bit wobbly, don't worry too much about it. The most important thing at this stage is making sure that the dovetail is perfectly flush with the top of the legs, and the underside of this mortise and tenon we cut in the last episode is perfectly level with the underside of these side rails. If it's not, then you're going to have all sorts of issue when fitting the drawer later. So prioritize those over everything. With that said, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to press the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one where we're going to begin tapering these legs.